Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience and welcome to the webinar titled Exploring Metrics in Siebel Clinical, presented by BioPharm Systems Param Singh, Vice President of Clinical Trial Management Solutions. I'm Eugene Stefanov, the Marketing Manager at BioPharm, and I will be going over some housekeeping items before I turn it over to Param. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. However, you may submit questions to the speaker at any time today by typing them in the chat feature located on the left side of your screen. Please state your questions clearly. Note, other webinar participants will not see your questions or comments. Nonetheless, your questions to the speaker will be addressed as time allows towards the end of the presentation. If you still have unanswered questions after the webinar, or would like to request additional information from BioPharm, feel free to visit the company's website for contact information. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on BioPharm's website within 24 hours. We will also be emailing you a link to the recording. This concludes our housekeeping items. I would now like to turn the call over to Param Singh.
Thanks, Eugene. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be looking at exploring metrics in a variety of different ways within Siebel Clinical. Let me start out by introducing myself. My name is Param Singh, and I'm the Vice President of the Clinical Trial Management Solution Practice at BioPharm Systems. I've been working in the industry since '99, and during that time have almost exclusively been working with Siebel Clinical and CTMS solutions. Before joining BioPharm about 5 years ago now, I was part of Accenture's pharma R&D practice and leading CTMS implementations there as well. And overall now, been part of over 25 projects of Siebel Clinical implementations or integration projects, and these vary from a wide range of pharma, CROs, medical device companies, academic institutions, and also range from size from local sort of 30 or so users to global implementations of over 4,500 users. So we're going to look at a variety of ways that we've sort of implemented certain metrics that we can get out of the system. So I'm going to be using a lot of the experience that we've built with our past clientele. And also, there's a note here of creation of Ascend, our Oracle Accelerate solution for Siebel Clinical. So a lot of what we're going to see today in the demonstration is going to be on our accelerated solution. So now that I've introduced myself, I'd like to take just a minute to talk about my team here at BioPharm and explain a little bit more about what we do. We provide a variety of services and products related to clinical trial management. We manage implementations of Siebel Clinical, whether those are custom implementations or implementations of our Siebel Clinical Accelerator, Ascend. We also implement Oracle Health Sciences LabPass, which is Oracle's Phase 1 automation solution. Also, if you've seen some of our previous webinars, you know that we do extensive work with integrations in Siebel Clinical or LabPass and related systems. Our approach to system implementation is very process-focused. We also provide our process consulting services to help organizations define and harmonize their SOPs and business processes across their organization with respect to clinical trial management. And we offer comprehensive training services and products related to Siebel Clinical and our Ascend solution as well. This is just a glimpse of some of the services and products that we offer in this space. And this is specific to my practice. BioPharm also has a clinical safety and pharmacovigilance practice, data warehousing, and clinical data management as well. So if you need more information about any of the services and products that we offer, please feel free to contact us. So here's a look at today's agenda. Siebel Clinical is known for its robust ability to track trial information. but we can still struggle from time to time when it comes to understanding what key metrics are available in the system, and how to get them out of it. So this webinar is going to walk through the available metrics in Siebel Clinical and what it has to offer out of the box. It will also look at some ways to get additional metrics out of the system via data manipulation and configuration. And so throughout the webinar, I'm also going to be jumping back into the actual system itself and demonstrating some of those ways to get those metrics out of the system. And we'll look at some add-on tools as well. And then at the end, prior to the time when we have sort of for general questions, we'll have time for you to bring up some specific metrics that you would like to get out of Siebel Clinical. And we'll also discuss how you would go about doing so, and I might even have a possibility to demonstrate some of that. So, we're looking for a decent amount of audience input for this webinar. So please be thinking about the metrics that you would like me to discuss at the end as I go through this webinar. If you think of some metrics that you would like me to demonstrate, or have any questions that you would like me to answer and address during the question and answer session at the end, please submit them in the chat feature at any time, and those will come directly to us, and Eugene will receive those and help moderate those during the appropriate times. So let's start by looking at some commonly requested metrics out of Siebel Clinical or CTMS systems in general. These are metrics that are most commonly requested by clinical project managers and research associates to better manage global trials by enabling them to capture and track clinical information at multiple levels of the clinical hierarchy. Users can track in real time a variety of information at the protocol, the region, and country levels, making it easy to conduct global trials. Essentially, project teams and managers need to gauge the project status and benchmark it against performance milestones, critical events, budgeted cost, to gauge the progress of each study and overall the efficiency of the organization in a variety of measures. So this is centered around various milestones and costs, and looking at comparisons between what was planned or even what was baselined, what's currently forecasted, and what those actuals look like, and drawing comparisons across the board. Two informative metrics are the subject status and enrollment rates as well. So these are plotted for an individual site, for a region, and for a protocol. These are, in terms of looking at the progress of the study, subject status and enrollment is a key metric. Reports can be created by users as well within Siebel Clinical, with little to no involvement on the development side, depending on the complexity and customization of the reporting requirement to extract various data to derive certain metrics as well. So these are all the commonly requested, in general, the commonly requested metrics out of Siebel Clinical. So what I want to do today is start by looking at what metrics are available out of the box with Siebel Clinical Vanilla. So if you've implemented Siebel Clinical Vanilla or are thinking to do so, we want to look at what metrics are available out of the box. There are a few categories of metrics that are available in the base product. There are some site metrics that can be derived based on information entered at the site level. There are some basic subject and enrollment metrics, as these are key for virtually every organization running clinical trials. Then, of course, there are some basic financial metrics that are available or can be derived from the base product. And we'll look at each of these in a bit more detail. And any and all of the metrics that we'll look at in these areas are they all roll up to the site, region, and protocol level. So essentially anything that you're tracking at the site level and you're deriving metrics from it, it will aggregate that data up the clinical hierarchy. So aggregating the data for that clinical hierarchy is covered for these out-of-the-box metrics, and you'll see that during the demo. So the first category are basic site-related metrics. Again, this is with the vanilla product, and what we have is basically the ability to see number of planned sites for a particular protocol or a country or region versus the number of actual sites in a particular protocol. So, we have the ability to see that sort of planned versus actuals at a very, very basic level. With specific milestones, we have the ability to capture the dates when each site was initiated and terminated. So as site-level attributes, we have the ability to capture that. And then those metrics are rolled up to the region and country level to show the first or earliest site that was initiated. So first site initiated date and last site terminated date once that protocol is complete. So that's sort of what at the basic level, what's available at these levels, and this is all in the terms of metrics that the system will offer a basic, planned versus actuals on number of site and these key milestones. So as mentioned earlier, subject metrics are a key performance indicator for many organizations tracking study and site performance. So what does Siebel Clinical offer in terms of metrics related to subjects? Well, in this area, we do have some additional information. So we still have the ability to see a basic planned number of subjects versus actual number of subjects at the various levels. But we also have a subject status analysis which allows us to see the breakdown of those actuals of all subjects and their various statuses as well. So not only do you see the planned versus actuals at a high level, but you can see the various stages of those actual subjects. And this is presented in the system as exportable or viewable data, as well as visualization in charts. Similarly, we can also see basic actual enrollment rates captured in the system graphically as well. And this shows how many subjects have been enrolled in various time periods on a site. And all of this information is also rolled up to the higher levels in the hierarchy to provide the same metric and visualization, but in an aggregated manner across that region or across the entire study. With regards to milestones, similar to the site milestones that were mentioned earlier, we do have the ability to track things like enrollment dates and completion dates for subjects, so all the status dates related to the subject, so that the system can then roll that information up, roll those key dates up the hierarchy as well. So at the site level, we will, based on what we're tracking at the subject level, we'll be able to see when the first subject was enrolled or the earliest subject that was enrolled, and once we close out that site, we'll be able to see that the last subject off the study and what those dates were. And again, all of that is going to be rolling up to the higher levels as well. So at a protocol level, a study manager across all of their sites will be able to see when that first subject enrolled milestone happened across that protocol. So now we'll look at some of those out-of-the-box metrics in our this is the last category, which is financial metrics. And these, of course, are also very important when tracking study progress and overall spend across studies for an organization. What the system offers, again, is the ability to look at basically what has been budgeted for a site and offer a comparison of that against what has actually been spent. And then the actuals are actually broken up further to show what has been earned to date, meaning activity or milestones that have been completed, which should be paid for, and then a paid to date amount, which signifies the total that has already been spent or paid out to the investigators or the institutions. And again, as with with the other metrics, this is automatically aggregated for the system from site to regions to studies, and even up to your clinical program, so even a higher level as well. So now it's time for our demo. So I'm going to share my desktop and jump into our system. And what we're going to look at is are each of those three in a little bit of detail here. So in terms of planning around number of like site metrics, essentially, number of planned sites. So at a very basic level, we have the ability to capture things like number of planned sites and number of planned subjects. So again, these are just high-level attributes at the protocol level, very basic sort of tracking, and we can, against each of these particular protocols, we will be able to see what the actuals look like just from a look at the system by looking at the list of actual sites against that particular protocol. So we have a number of planned sites and we have a number of actual sites. You're able to either look at this information or derive it, export it, etc. We also have the main things that we need to look at are the milestones that we were capturing at the site level. So when we're looking at the actual sites themselves, we have the ability to capture site-initiated dates and site-terminated dates, and all of this is then rolled up to the protocol level to be able to show us the first site-initiated dates and last site-terminated dates against that entire protocol. So for all of the sites within that protocol, that metric is sort of rolling up to those higher levels. Similar to that is our subjects. So we looked at number of planned subjects for that particular protocol. We also have that ability to capture number of planned subjects for a particular site. And then we have the ability to see the actuals. So when we're looking at each individual site, we'll be able to see not only the number of actual subjects, but as they're broken down in their various statuses. So here we have number of planned subjects of 60, and we have actuals rolling up from the subject level of how many have been screened, how many are completed, how many enrolled, screened, failed, rescreened, etc. And all of this, again, is rolled up all the way to the protocol level, so you see the same level of detail at the protocol level, and number of planned subjects and number of screened, etc. And you also have the ability to see the visualizations as well. So for that particular data, we can see a visualization chart, again, out of the box with Siebel Clinical Vanilla, some visualizations on what that looks like, and you have some abilities to change sort of the look and feel of the visualization. We also have the first subject enrolled, last subject off study milestones. Again, those are rolling up from the actual subject statuses that have been captured at the subject level. So again, that aggregation and roll-up is inherent within the Siebel application. And last, let's briefly look at our financials. So from a financials perspective, at the site level, we have the ability to capture our total sort of contract amount. And what that essentially means is our overall site budget for this particular site. And that's coming from the ability to track multiple clinical trial agreements or contracts against that particular site. So if you have separate contracts for investigator payments and other things, you can actually track those. And then the site will aggregate that up for a total contract amount for that particular site. And as you generate activities that complete, so milestones, subject visits, other things that have payment against them, and then we actually complete these activities, we have the ability to capture, or the system has the ability to capture these high-level summary financial information earned to date and paid to date. Again, so earn to date is demonstrating the activity, all of the milestones, subject visits, and procedures that have been completed to date that have been, that are ready to be paid for. And then we have a paid to date, which is essentially everything that has already been paid to that investigator for completed activity. So we have this aggregation, this financial metric here at the site level, and again, all of that rolls up to their individual regions as well as your protocols as well. So when you're looking at, let me go to one that has some data. So earn to date and paid to dates, financial aggregation for that particular study. And we also see that rolling up to the highest level, which is your clinical program. So you can see the earned to date and paid to date against the entire program. So for a collection of sites, for a collection of studies, if they all are part of a particular business unit or a particular product, you can actually see total spend against all studies for that particular product or therapeutic area or business unit, depending on how you set up the system for the clinical program. So that's basically, from an out-of-the-box perspective, that's basically what we can get from Siebel Clinical out of the box. So now that we've seen those basic metrics that out of the box can offer, we can look at ways to get additional metrics through other methods. You'll probably all agree that what Siebel Clinical Vanilla has to offer out of the box is very basic. So we want to be able to look at other ways to get additional metrics out of the system, and we can do that by some very basic data manipulation. So the query functionality, export to Excel, those are inherent features of Siebel Clinical. So we can derive some important metrics simply by using those features and doing some data manipulation. So we're capturing a lot of information at each level. And some of that information, which is rolled up but not aggregated, can be used to derive metrics simply by, again, querying, sorting, filtering, and doing some basic analysis either within the system or in Excel after an export. So a simple example is looking at a breakdown of site by statuses. So we can look at all sites globally for a protocol and sort it by status and do automatic record counts in Siebel or do pivot tables and charts in Excel. And I'll show you some examples of that in our demo. We can also have the system provide us with additional metrics just by doing some basic configuration. And here are some areas that we've addressed in our Ascend Siebel CTMS Accelerator that we'll look at in the demo as well. First, looking at payments. A key performance indicator that we have many organizations look at is the efficiency with which they pay their investigators. We want to know whether we're paying our investigators on time and within our internal timelines. So if your organization has a goal to being to turn around a payment from requested to paid in a certain number of days, the system can help you manage and track that, as well as identify occurrences where you have not met those timelines. And this can be set for just the time it takes a payment to get approved to the time it gets get the actual payment paid, or both. So you can actually track efficiencies in a variety of steps along that process. Another key performance indicator for most organizations is around monitoring. How efficient is our internal process on trip report review and approval? We want to be able to see how long it takes for each site visit from visit complete to trip report submitted. How long does it take to get that trip report submitted? And then from trip report submitted to trip report approved. So how long does it take that review and approval process to to be executed, and then the total time from visit complete to trip report approval. So the authoring of the trip report as well as the final approval. So if we have some standards that we're trying to meet, then these metrics will ensure that we're at least tracking whether we're within our standard or not, and then again easily identify the occurrences where we have not met this guideline. And then we also have some standard for other milestones. So where internally we set some specific variances between other key site and study milestones, and again want to see the efficiencies or inefficiencies in our process between those key milestones. So for example, we want to see how long it takes for us to go from study startup to IRB submission, and how long that process takes internally, and whether we have some guidelines around how long it should take, and want to identify where those inefficiencies are in your internal process, or even a vendor's process. So if some of this information or some of this process steps are happening externally, we want to be able to identify where the bottleneck is. And then we've also done another more robust study metrics configuration for past clients as well that allow for really good visibility into some key metrics related to a study all in one area. And this was done just by doing some Siebel configuration and some basic BI report development. So essentially what this configuration consisted of, and we called it a sort of a executive summary or a protocol summary, but it gave a high-level view of progress of all the studies, of each study, basic information about that study. We looked at plan versus actuals around some of the same things that we looked at, so site progress in terms of site milestones, as well as subjects, so plan versus actuals and subjects. But we also incorporated a subject forecasting tool as well, so capability. It enabled the system to be able to do subject forecasting on a month-to-month basis for a particular protocol. So you can actually see how well you're doing against that forecast. So you'll see your forecast or your baseline, your forecast, and your actuals all on a sort of visual graph to be able to look at a varying forecast model within your Siebel Clinical system. And we also have some key milestone tracking. So the actuals, baselines, current forecast, and actuals around site protocol, first site initiation visit, first subject first visit, etc. Some key milestones that we want to be able to track at that study level. And we also had turnaround metrics. So between those key milestones, how long did it take to get from point A to point B? So approved protocol to first patient in. What was the enrollment time period? What was our last patient out to final database lock on this particular study? So we looked at those key milestones, and based on either your baseline or your current forecast or your actuals, how well we're tracking around those turnaround metrics. So if there's an internal standard, we can actually see how well we're doing against that standard. So let's look at some of these within the system, and I do have some screenshots as well that'll showcase some of this also. So first we'll look at sort of the basic queries and exports and things like that you can do via some data manipulation of the system. So again, we have that example of sites by status for each of your protocols. So at the very least, what we can do is in the system against all of our, and let me just switch this to all sites. So we can look at all of our sites, again, sort it. We can query it for a particular status and see what our number of active sites are and do some record counts and things like that. But again, to do some better sort of manipulation of data, we can also export this information out. So I'm going to export it to Excel. And once you have it in Excel, we can do some very quick sort of data manipulation. So here's our data, and I've already created some pivot tables and charts against that same data. So we have our data. We can do a very quick count by status per protocol of where our sites are, and we can also turn it into a pivot chart here and give some visualization against number of sites against each protocol and what their statuses are, how many are on hold, how many completed, active, and planned, etc. So this was something again very easily we can do from our export and use some tools within Excel to be able to get derive some metrics out of the system. The things that we have within our Ascend Accelerator that show some of the other metrics that we've done, that we've made through configuration are things like payment turnaround. So we'll be able to see for our, let me go into one of these sites. For our site payments, if we go into our payments, we can actually, I think I picked the wrong site here. Just go to our payments across the organization. We'll be able to see, when these payments were generated and when these payments were actually paid out. So we have our paid dates against our requested dates. So, we're capturing this, or the system is capturing this payment turnaround metric. So I can very easily, again, if we have a standard that we need to pay our investigators within 2 weeks of having this payment requested, so we need to process it and cut a payment within 2 weeks, we can look at every occurrence that we have not met that particular internal standard or goal. So this is a way, again, the system is calculating this payment turnaround, and we can identify areas. We can even have notifications where this is not occurring, and we can sort of understand why this is happening. Maybe it's related to we can actually dive into the details against these occurrences now and find out where the bottleneck is and why we're not meeting our internal standards. Similar to that, we have our trip report standards, which are how efficient are we in reviewing and approving our internal trip reports. So when we're looking at our site visits, and I'll look at site visits across the entire organization. And we have our approval turnaround, or submission turnaround, and total turnaround. And what this is showing us is the number of days it took from when the visit was complete to when it was first submitted for review and approval. Approval turnaround is the number of days it took from when it was originally submitted to final approval of that trip report. And then total turnaround is, again, visit completed to trip report approved. So, again, if we have some internal standards around, we want to see our submissions happen within a week of the visit being completed. We want to see all the occurrences where our trip report wasn't done within that particular guideline. We can start to see, is it the same study team? Is it the same study manager? We can sort of dive into some details around, well, why are we inefficient in this particular case? Additional information that we've configured into the system is when we dive into the actual trip report itself, we can actually see the trip report approval history. So we can see that how many times this trip report was rejected and had to be resubmitted, and then rejected again and resubmitted. So you can start to look at the reasons for those inefficiencies once you've identified through that metric that we are not meeting those internal standards. And then our protocol summary piece that I discussed in where we have a very robust sort of configuration that we've made for, again, past clients to be able to see very detailed information about metrics, some key milestones, baselines, currents, and actuals. I have some screenshots that actually show this functionality. So here we have our milestones, our key milestones for our protocol. And if you're having trouble seeing this, click on the full screen option and it may enlarge it for you. But we have our list of key milestones. We have our baseline. We have our current forecast and our actuals. So actuals, some of the actuals are actually pulled in and again, rolled up from lower levels. So this gives you the ability to see what was originally planned, what our current plan is based on anything that's changed in the protocol, and what the actuals look like today. We also have the ability to look at cycle time. So again, the variances between two key protocols. So if our internal standard for approved protocol to first patient in is 10 days or 10 weeks, and the forecast is 8 based on what you've actually put in your forecast for each of those particular milestones. And then your actuals, this looks like a little bit skewed data, but your actuals have a variance that's quite larger. You can actually start to see where you are on this particular protocol with as it compares to your internal standards. So this shows you how far away you are from your internal standards against those particular cycle times. And again, based on those and the other milestones that we've entered, our plan to standards. So if we have our forecast for some key milestones based on some other milestones that have been completed and what those actuals look like, you can start to see what the variance between what the forecast was and what the actual is. So how far away from planned are we against these particular key milestones within this particular protocol. We've also, here's our projections. So here's our ability to, on a month-to-month basis, to be able to put in projected enrollment and projection of enrolled subjects. And then we're actually, all the actuals are getting pulled in from what we've actually put into the system. So again, it's drawing comparisons between your projected enrollment and then your actual enrollment. We also have projected sites and actual sites in this particular configuration. But again, I think for most clients, the enrollments on the subject side are the key milestones to be able to look at subject forecasting and what that looks like for a particular protocol. And that's something that the Siebel system is lacking in terms of forecasting out subject metrics and subject enrollment. And so with this configuration, it allows us to look at that in a little bit more detail. And just to show you the actual report that gets generated out of all of that information that we just entered, this is a sample of that particular metrics report or protocol summary report. Again, it has basic information about the protocol. We have our cycle times, standard forecast and actuals. We have our plan to internal standards. We have a lot of other information around other key milestones. And then we have our visualization graphs of site activation, and it's a little hard to see, I know, but site activation over time, and then also enrollment over time. So we have our projected forecast, and then we have our actual screened and actual enrolled patients and subjects in this enrollment graph. So you're able to see that comparison sort of visually. So with all those configurations, we're able to get a lot more metrics out of the Siebel system as opposed to just the basic ones that are available out of the box. And again, this is all done without the use of business intelligence tools like OBIEE and CDA, and that's what we're going to discuss next. So clinical development analytics is a prepackaged business intelligence and dashboarding tool that comes as an add-on to Siebel Clinical. Right? It's built with Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition, and it has dynamic customizable dashboards, prepackaged clinical metrics. So a lot of what we've looked at in terms of configuration and what we derived out of the system, a lot of that comes prepackaged within the CDA application. And it also allows a platform for flexible ad hoc reporting capability as well. So the examples that you're seeing on the screen, these are actual dashboards or components of dashboards that we can see from CDA directly in the Siebel system when it's integrated. So this is something to consider after you've used a tool like Siebel Clinical in your organization for a little while and start to understand what are key and important metrics for your organization. CDA is going to allow for very thorough analytical analysis of your data. Again, it can produce dynamic dashboards and empower end users to create very comprehensive visual and meaningful ad hoc reports that they can drive decision making. This is also a tool that can pull together data from multiple related systems. So not only can you drive metrics directly on the Siebel Clinical or CTMS data, but also pull data from other systems such as your clinical data management or EDC system as well, and look at consolidated reports on that data. And so what we've shown you in the other capabilities is basic data manipulation or Siebel configuration that gives you those basic metrics without the need for CDA. But again, if you want to run reports and draw metrics from multiple systems, this is going to be your best option and handled by Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition or CDA. And I wish we had time to show you some demos of CDA, but we can save that for another webinar, another detailed webinar specifically on CDA. But these are, again, just some sample visualizations that are available out of the box with CDA for CTMS. And some additional information, what we can get out of CDA, study enrollment over time. So anything with a time component where we're looking at a snapshot, we want to be able to see what our progress was at a particular time point within the study. CDA allows us to do very good analysis of that. Obviously, when you're in the Siebel Clinical System, when you're looking at those enrollment statistics, it's going to show you what the current enrollment statistics are. You actually have to do a little bit of work to get if you wanted to see where you were in terms of enrollment 3 months ago versus today, that's something that you can do with CDA very easily. We have site milestone reports, first and latest subject screened, enrolled, and randomized. Comparative graphs for site progress over time. Again, looking at various snapshots in time against the progress of a variety of different milestones and metrics within the system. CDA is going to allow you to look at that versus, within the Siebel system, you're going to see current, but if you want to see a snapshot in time, you'll have to do some manipulation, some additional manipulation of the data to be able to get, where were we 3 months ago versus today. And then clinical document cycle times report as well. So, cycle times with documents and document reviews, things like that are already included within the CDA tool. So here we are at the audience portion. What types of study metrics does your organization track? What types of metrics would you like to track but you don't know how? Here's a list of some. And so as I have time, I'll be happy to show you in Siebel Clinical how to derive certain things if at all possible. But what I want to do is why don't we do this? Let me hit the summary slide on the next slide and summarize everything that we've done, and then in the question and answer section we can accommodate any requests for additional demos in the system to look at some of these other metrics that we may not have covered today. So if you would again submit your requests or your questions on the chat feature, we'll be able to address those during the question and answer session. So just to summarize, again, we looked at out-of-the-box metrics, for site and subject and financials. And again, the key thing there is it was very basic around simply just tracking what our planned, number of sites or planned number of subjects and our planned budget for a particular site is going to be, and then drawing that in comparison with just the actual, so actual number of sites, actual number of subjects, and the actual financials that we've spent on a particular site or a particular protocol, and again aggregating that all the way up to the protocol level. So again, very basic plan versus actuals. Same thing with key milestone dates. We're able to look at plan versus actuals there as well. But the actuals that are being entered at the subject and site levels, we're able to derive, or the system is able to derive some aggregation of that. So the earliest or the first subject or the first site that was initiated or first subject that was enrolled, all of those are things that we can get out of the basic Siebel Clinical vanilla system. And all of the other things that we've seen in the system today are all through either data manipulation, where we query and export to Excel, or we do some basic data manipulation directly in the Siebel system itself by sorting and filtering and doing record counts and things like that, or through configuration. So basic configuration through Siebel tools to put in some calculatable or calculated metrics and aggregations of turnaround times for payments or site visits, or variances between key milestones and being able to see what those turnaround times are between those milestones. Those are all something that we can do just directly with some basic configuration of Siebel Clinical. So you can get a decent amount of metrics out of the system even without CDA, but of course, as we've seen with CDA, you get a lot more dynamic sort of dashboards and ad hoc reporting capability, and the ability to draw metrics across different systems, and that's something that the CDA tool has an advantage. So with that, we'll move into the question and answer section, and what I'll do is I'll let you sort of guide me as to whether it's a question or it's a request for a demo.
Great. Thanks so much, Param. So we received numerous questions throughout the webinar. So if you do have additional ones, feel free to ask them in the chat feature. We'll begin with the first question. How would you manage comparing to baseline and change over time?
So,
just as a reminder, I will be stating the questions as they were asked. Okay.
So with that, so how do we manage comparison to baseline and change over time? So what we've done in the system is create for each milestone or each set of milestones, we have a baseline and then a current planned and then an actual. So your baseline is something that, again, you enter once and you're not going to change that over time. And then your planned is something that, as things happen within the study and as things change, the only value that you're going to change for that milestone is your planned date for that milestone. So that can be a current planned date that can change over time versus your baseline, which is going to be set to whatever you entered in at the beginning of the study what your baseline was. If you need to rebaseline, there's capability that you can do a rebaseline, but the whole functionality of baseline is to try to capture what the original planned was, and then if things change, that's fine, but then we can sort of see how much things have changed on this particular protocol with the variance between baseline versus either the current planned or the actual.
Great, thank you. Second question. Of what we have seen, please clarify what is in Ascend and not in Siebel Clinical.
Okay. So the first portion that I demonstrated, which was simply the number of planned subjects, number of planned sites, the contract amounts, and the subject graphs, the actual graphical visualization of subject enrollment, all of those are things that are in Siebel Clinical Vanilla. Now, we might have changed them very slightly, but in base functionality, all of that is available in Siebel Clinical Vanilla. Anything related to turnaround time, so the payment turnarounds, capturing when the payment was created, when it was paid, and looking at the turnaround times for that, turnaround times for trip reports, everything that we saw in the trip report today was something that's in Ascend and not necessarily in Siebel Clinical Vanilla, and all of the variances that we saw between milestones. So looking at key milestones, looking at the protocol summary, and those reports, all of that is in Ascend and not in Siebel Clinical Vanilla.
Great, thank you. What metrics do companies usually track at the study level?
What metrics do we? So I think the protocol summary is probably the best representation of that. So looking at the study level, what's going to be key for a study manager, if we have like weekly or monthly meetings on study status, what are going to be the important milestones to be able to track? All of that is listed on that protocol summary, and we can I can share it just to show you. But essentially, looking at the key progress between when you have a protocol signed, when we have first sites activated, when we have first patients in. These are the key milestones that we're looking at tracking at the study level, just to again see the overall progress of the study. And this is a great snapshot for a study manager, right? So on a monthly basis, if we're just generating this report, this gives me all the information on a single page to be able to see not only what our baseline and currents are, but how well we're doing to our standards as well. So if we have standards, this enables us to see this month how well we're doing and how well we're tracking to those standards. If we're behind in a certain aspect, this report will sort of call it out to be able to get that study back on track.
Thank you. Does your system offer the option of integrating a TMS and an investigator portal?
Yes. So, we've done integrations between Siebel Clinical or more specifically Ascend as well to electronic trial master files or electronic document management systems. We actually have a webinar that speaks to that entire topic, and actually goes through a demonstration of an integration integration that we've done specifically with Siebel Clinical and a document management system for that specific purpose. So the short answer is yes, but for more information, I'd encourage you to look at our list of webinars. We have a few webinars related to integration specifically, but one of those is on the topic of integrating with a document management system for eTMF.
Great, thank you. Is this system able to automatically send out a reminder to the site to update the data and receive a site confirmation to make sure that the reports are based on the current data?
So again, I think the short answer is yes. So the system can certainly send out email notifications for any sort of triggers that we configure within the system. So Siebel is very flexible in nature to be able to send out notifications when various things either need to be done or certain things happen within the system that trigger a notification, and we can send that notification to anyone virtually. But to have the site update their data directly into the Siebel system, that's something that we haven't seen very frequently at all, because this system is meant to be sort of internal to the sponsor organization or the CRO or the ARO. But opening it up to the site is something that you're able to do with the Siebel system. It's just it hasn't been done very frequently in the past, and the reason for that is just from a licensing perspective. There's a enabling or pushing the system out to external users. You'll have to pay for their licenses as well, so that's one aspect. And then two, just from a security standpoint, having external users access the system, you'll want to have them have authentication to your system. So being able to manage that administratively, logistically, gets a little bit complicated when we're talking about even opening it up to the sites, because your user base will then grow pretty dramatically. So the short answer is that the system's perfectly capable of doing all of that, but whether you set up the system to allow the sites to have access directly to it is another question. What we've seen in the past is an integration of a site portal. So when you have a site portal in place, that you can use that mechanism to get updates of data from the site directly, and then you'll have an integration between your investigator portal and your Siebel Clinical system. And that's what we've done before. So, and that's another sort of safety measure as well, because you want to make sure that your data, your data integrity stays intact. So, when you're receiving these updates, you want to sort of verify that those updates are accurate before making those changes directly in the Siebel system. So, your integration should take care of that and look at that data and whether it's complete before it actually makes its way into the Siebel system.
Thank you. So just as an update, we have 3 more questions or so. So I'll hopefully we can get through these in the next 2 minutes or so. Is there an interface from Siebel to business objects?
Yes. So Siebel does have a business objects connector. So if you wanted to, I'm assuming the question is if we wanted to do a lot of the reporting and visualizations in business objects. Siebel does have a connector where you can do all of that reporting using business objects instead of the inherent reporting tool.
Next question is, can you generate median site metrics across protocols in a region?
Can you generate median site metrics across protocols in a region? Can we get a little bit more clarification on that? For an example?
So, in the meantime, we'll go on to the next question, which is, can you get a number of protocol amendments during the prior year overall for all studies?
during the prior year of overall of all studies. Yes. So so let me go into the system. So one way to do that is from a document management perspective or document tracking perspective. So in the document tracking screen, we have the ability to see all documents across the entire organization. So if we're tracking our protocol amendments in this section, we can, and I don't know if I have any amendments here, but let me look at if we have an amendment. So let me just look at the protocol. Let me just look at protocol approval, just to show you the example. But you would basically track your protocol amendments if you want to track them as documents within the system. You're able to query for, let's say, the protocol signature page. So this will be your protocol amendment, and there's actually an amendment right there. So it was just spelled differently. But you would query for your amendment, and based on the dates, you can actually do a query and use Query Assistant to look at dates that are within this year. So if you have let's do a plan date. So you can have a plan date that is before or after. Let's see, after today. Sorry, before today, and then after a certain date. So you can actually do a complex query. Sorry, I'm having troubles typing. And then also after a year ago. So you would be able to run this query if you put in all the criteria and execute that query, and you'll get your listing of all of your amendments that are happening or that have occurred or were planned. And you can use any of these fields, of course. So if they were approved, we can use the approved date instead of the plan date in our query, and be able to get anything that was approved in the last year. So a very similar example is, and we use this very frequently, is when we're looking at documents that are expiring in the next 30 days to be able to action them. So very similar query to be able to look at documents that are either expired or expiring in the next 30 days. So being able to run queries like that against your documents is a way to get to that information.
Perfect, thank you. And regarding the previous questions, the participant added approval times for protocol documents in Asia as an example.
Okay, yes. So I think it's very, very similar in nature, so that if we're looking at variances, right? So I don't have variances in our system right now related to that, but if we have basic variances at the site level, and let's actually look at just I guess payment turnarounds. So if we have variances against approval times against some documents, we can drive, and let's say if we query this for just a particular protocol, because you want to see that either within a protocol or not, and then to drive to get like median, like an average basically for that particular region. Again, if we query for a particular region under that protocol, we can get this list. We can either have a report that generates this list as well as the average against that, or again, you can very easily just take this into Excel and get that, any sort of data manipulation or that you can do in Excel to get the averages that you want, or a chart related to that particular metric that you're looking for. So again, the short answer is you can do it through configuration for sure. I don't have that particular one configured in the system for me to show you, but if we look at some key variances that you configure within the system, you can certainly get to, by just using the query functionality, get to the list that you're interested in a particular region, and then drive a report off that, or drive, export that information and get that in Excel. The other thing you can do is if we were just looking at a particular protocol and you wanted to get the averages across, for multiple regions, and you wanted to look at what the average for UK was, the average for US was, again, by exporting this out into Excel, you can certainly do that, or you can create a BI publisher report. If it's something that is done on a frequent basis, you can create a BI publisher report that will get you the same visualization that you would be able to do in Excel. So BI publisher can do everything that Excel can do in terms of the pivot charts and tables and graphs. But if it's part of your standard process, I would make it a BI publisher report. But if it's something that you're just doing as a study manager on your own, and it's not a standard report, you can certainly do that in Excel after a quick export.
Great, thank you so much. So that'll wrap it up for us. I apologize for going over the hour, but we definitely felt the need to address the questions that were asked. If you do have other questions, please feel free to contact us via phone or email. You can see several of our team members' contact information on this slide. Today's webinar will be available on biopharm.com within 24 hours, and we will email it to you for review, and you can share it with your colleagues as well. We thank you for your participation and hope that the information we provided you today was helpful. Have a great rest of the day and evening.